Hey, what's up? It's Anthony Marley Love. Welcome to another episode of Traveling While Black.
Yes, welcome back, everyone. We're on our third city in our TWB Across America Volume 1 series.
For this episode, we are in the beautiful city of Cheyenne, Wyoming. You're probably asking, what the heck is there to do in Cheyenne, Wyoming? Well, we're about to show you.
Yeah, so take a look at the episode, and as always, let us know what you think. A few years back, we started our show to help others interested in exploring the Pacific Northwest.
Inspired by the spirit of the Negro Motorist Green Book, we wanted to be a valuable resource to Black and BIPOC travelers, while also connecting them to some of the most amazing places in this part of the country.
We thought, what if we took our show to some other cities across the United States? What new things could we learn? What new stories could we hear?
So we decided to find out and picked 4 cities:
Kansas City, Missouri;
Denver, Colorado;
Cheyenne, Wyoming;
Billings, Montana, and loaded up in the car to drop in to experience each for a couple of days.
And of course, rate our experience for the drive, the amount of fun, and most importantly, how comfortable we felt visiting as a Black traveler.
I'm Anthony Love.
I'm Marley Love.
Come along with us on Traveling While Black Across America,
Volume 1. For the third stop in our TWB Across America series, we headed north up Interstate 25 into the state of Wyoming to check out the capital city of Cheyenne.
Wyoming, just like Colorado, is another state that is part of what is referred to as the Rocky Mountain States. And while the state is almost similar to Colorado in size, it has far less people. And in fact, it has the lowest population of all the Rocky Mountain states.
Enter in Cheyenne, the most populous city within the least populous Rocky Mountain state. One of the reasons why we chose it as one of our stops as a part of our TWB Across America series, Volume 1. The other reason why we chose to stop in Wyoming at all is because we had never been.
Yep, because that's part of what this road trip is about. Getting out and seeing parts of the country that we wouldn't have otherwise got to see unless we drove. I mean, there's not many flights flying direct into Cheyenne, but who knows what stories we were missing and what hidden gems there were for us to find.
Cheyenne would also be yet another state capital city we would be visiting on this road trip. Interestingly, both of the capitals we visited on this road trip are only 2 of 11 with gold domes. We promise we didn't plan that.
The Wyoming Capitol building is the original building that was actually built before the state was even officially a state. But the building is only one of the many artifacts around Cheyenne that speak to the city's unique and interesting history.
From the booths to mosaics all around town, it's not too hard to tell that Cheyenne is proud of their history. And on our first visit, we found out exactly why the city at least appears so proud.
The story of Cheyenne, Wyoming begins with the story of the American Railroad, specifically a railroad company, the Union Pacific Railroad.
In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railroad Act into law. This would create a transcontinental railroad that would stretch from the eastern United States to California.
Delayed due to the breakout of the Civil War, it wasn't until 1867 that a Union Pacific chief engineer, Grenville Dodge, was sent to survey the area, so to choose as the site of the Union Pacific's Mountain Region headquarters.
Because of its strategic location and geographical advantages, Dodge would choose a town site named after the native tribe that lived in the area, Cheyenne. Thanks to Dodge's decision and Union Pacific's Mountain Region operation, the city of Cheyenne, Wyoming was born.
As expected, Cheyenne would experience a rapid growth and economic boom, one that would benefit the state overall. And Union Pacific Railroad made sure that the politicians at the state legislature would never forget who to contribute the economic success to. They did this by strategically placing the company's railroad depot within direct view of the state capitol.
The history of the city includes much more than the railroad influence. Being that it was an early western frontier town, the history includes some of the outlaws and lawmen that are known throughout Wild West lore.
Today in Cheyenne, that history and those stories can easily be experienced and heard in many ways throughout the city. During our visit, we were excited to dive deep into the city's past and see if we can have fun while doing it.
And of course, for a city and state overall that does not have many Black residents, we wanted to find out what our experience would be as Black travelers visiting for the first time. But right away, having to face a notorious Wyoming foe, just getting there would be very uncomfortable.
Drive grade. Before we get into it, let us explain our new expanded drive grade rating scale.
We are expanding the rating scales for all of our categories, going from a 5-point scale to a 10-point scale. This way we can add more context to why we are rating experiences the way we are.
For a drive grade, that means we are breaking it down like this. The quality of the views along the route, the access to gas stations and restaurants along the route, the easiness of the route, or in other words, the route doesn't require a lot of highway switching, or even worse, hits a lot of traffic. Also, the quality of roadside attractions along the route. Finally, you already know, the quality of the parking options. Hopefully there are a lot of options, and even better, there are free options.
The drive from Denver to Cheyenne is only around an hour and 45 minutes, making it on paper the shortest of all the drives on our TWB Across America road trip. But the short drive time doesn't necessarily automatically equate to a great drive experience.
Nope, because on the drive from Colorado into Wyoming, you have a high chance of running into some of the area's notoriously strong and sustained gusts of wind that, according to scientists who study this stuff, are due to the interaction of mountain ranges and plains. See, as the air flows over the Rocky Mountains, it descends rapidly into Wyoming. My bad.
Yes, the winds are strong. So strong that you'll notice railroad crossing gates at the entrance ramps of the stretch of highway connecting the two states. That's because they will periodically shut down the highway during extremely strong periods. These conditions can be really dangerous for truck drivers.
On the day of our journey, we got to experience that wind and see firsthand the possibility of its power. Even though there was a wind advisory warning, we were able to hit the road before they shut down the highway.
Yes, the wind was a crazy and at times scary experience. I drove part of the way for every leg of the road trip up until this point. But for this trip, I was perfectly fine with letting Anthony handle it the whole way.
Yep, but we kept pushing through. And finally, we pulled into our hotel to take refuge from the non-stop windstorm, right before they would end up shutting down the highway we just got off of.
Initially, because of the wind, our hotel was a much welcome relief, but it would eventually lose its appeal. Because of the wind, it would be the place that, other than a couple of dinner runs, we couldn't leave for 2 days straight.
So, how does a short, crazy windy,
and somewhat scary
drive stack up against our rating scale? Let's start with the views. While we were in awe of the unfamiliarity of the landscape, the views had little to offer.
This area is very beautiful, so we know weather had a lot to do with the lack of views. So we'll still give a point here. Now, in regards to roadside amenities, the stretch of highway leaves a lot to be desired, although we sort of understand.
Yes, you definitely want to fill up before you leave Denver. Not many gas stations after a certain point, but because it is a short drive, there may be just enough options. So we'll give 1 point here. As for the difficulty of the route, the short ride is definitely going to warrant a point, but has to take a hit due to the treacherous wind. And if you happen to be driving an 18-wheeler, then just mark this off as a 0 all around.
As for roadside attractions, they look like a couple of hiking options and outdoor options, but again, the treacherous wind made it impossible to consider stopping, so we aren't giving any points there.
Finally, the category that this drive grade shines, parking. It doesn't matter that this is more than likely a result of having such a low population. Sign me up. The parking here was always free and always premium.
Even with Cheyenne having the most amazing parking situation, which brought Anthony so much joy, the drive grade comes to a 5 out of 10, giving our shortest drive our lowest drive grade score so far on this road trip. But again, considering the wind, this score makes sense.
Yep, the notorious Wyoming wind impacted our drive into Cheyenne. But coming up in level of fun, you're going to see firsthand how we try to experience the city despite it.
Level of fun.
Again, since we are expanding the rating scales for all of our categories, going from a 5-point scale to a 10-point scale, let us explain our level of fun.
For our 10-point level of fun rating, we will be considering the amount and quality of activities offered within the vicinity of the location, the variety of activities that apply to the different visitor demographics. And what we mean by this is, are the activities better suited for couples, singles, or families? Are they more suited for younger or older folks? And we are also taking into account the quality of restaurant options, the affordability of the area. Finally, are there any special events happening during our visit?
But it was a serious question if we would even get to put the scale to use in Cheyenne. due to the wind situation. Even the bison farm we were scheduled to experience on the first day arriving in the city had canceled operations that day due to the wind.
The first day we figured that the wind would subside at least by the next day, and we would be out and about within the town. Boy, were we wrong. The wind advisory continued into the next day. We only left our hotel 2 times, to go get lunch and to go get dinner.
Finally, on day 3, the wind calmed and the advisory was canceled. But most importantly, we were now able to go out and experience the city of Cheyenne. Since the city was built by the Union Pacific Railroad Company, it made most sense to us to first head to the historic Union Pacific Railroad Depot, which is registered as a National Historic Landmark.
The historic site is the original building built in 1886 by the Union Pacific Railroad and is the last remaining Grand Railroad station on the transcontinental route. On the inside, paintings and murals tell the story of Cheyenne and the Transcontinental Railroad.
Beyond the historic building itself, visitors can check out the museum within, the Cheyenne Depot Museum. This museum dives deeper into the same story of Cheyenne and the Transcontinental Railroad that are told by the murals and paintings that decorate the rest of the depot.
On this road trip, I learned a lot about myself, and one surprising new self aspect I discovered is that I must be more of a museum type of girl than I thought, because I really enjoyed the Cheyenne Depot Museum. Trust, I was really surprised at that, but the interactive exhibits and historical artifacts told a truly immersing story.
And when we say immersing, we really mean immersing. Not only can you sit and watch the actual trains that are still running today roll along the tracks, you know we had to do that. Along with that, you can also immerse yourself within the miniature world of railroads, as the museum is home to a famous miniature model railroad.
The world-famous Union Central and Northern Model Railroad. The model is a detailed and accurate representation of scale of the northern gauge Clear Creek, Colorado lines of the Colorado and Southern Railway in the early 20th century. This model railroad has a pretty interesting story in itself. Driven by his passion for trains and modeling, Harry W. Brunk originally built the model in Clarkson, Nebraska.
But eventually, in an effort to better preserve the impressive piece and present it to a wider audience, the 650 square foot model was relocated to the Cheyenne Depot Museum. What is wild is that the model railroad had to be cut into 10 pieces just so it could be transported to Cheyenne.
It actually took a team of volunteers a full year to reconstruct the model within its current location on the 2nd floor of the museum. The year's time to rebuild makes a lot of sense when you see the model firsthand. Each piece looks beautifully and meticulously designed to reflect the real thing.
Yep, that 1 year was nothing compared to the 30 that it took Harry to create the piece of art. And he really did do his thing in his representation of the narrow gauge Clear Creek, Colorado lines, which was a railroad that ran into the Rocky Mountains from 1872 to 1941.
If you're in Cheyenne, this is a stop definitely worth checking out. After the museum, our Cheyenne history fix continued when we hopped on the Cheyenne Street Railway trolley, a trolley tour of the city.
The 90-minute trolley tour took us around town, driving by and occasionally stopping in front of some of the historic and important buildings and landmarks in the city of Cheyenne. All the while, we were provided some very knowledgeable and entertaining storytelling on the history of Cheyenne and its influence on the state of Wyoming, all dictated by our talented trolley driver.
Yes, we definitely learned a lot about the interesting history of Cheyenne and the state of Wyoming. We did not realize that Wyoming was the first state in the Union to give women the right to vote. That was pretty cool.
After the tour, we felt like we were more than spooled up on the local history. So we wanted to experience another activity that Cheyenne and all of Wyoming is known for, the outdoors.
Just based on its beautiful landscape and its proximity to the Rocky Mountains, Cheyenne is close to a lot of great options for experiencing the outdoors, like the Medicine Bow National Forest.
But for our outdoor experience during our visit, we chose to check out Kurt Gowdy State Park, the park that is named after a famous sports broadcaster and Wyoming native. What's also great is that the park is only a 25-minute drive from downtown Cheyenne.
The park is beautiful. In the center, there are 3 crystal clear reservoirs that are apparently stocked with trout and salmon. At the front of the park, there's also a visitor center. And for what we did during our time at the park, well,
while the park is perfect for paddleboarding, boating, and camping, we weren't prepared for none of that. We would have hiked, but we couldn't find any trails close by within the park. And unfortunately, we didn't have time to investigate further because the infamous Wyoming wind started picking back up once again.
While the wind wasn't as bad as it had been in the days before, we considered all that we had done up to this point,
which included extending our stay in Cheyenne an extra day.
It was more than enough for us to feel like we had experienced enough of Cheyenne to at least put it up to our level of fun scale.
So, how did Cheyenne do? Starting with the quality of activities. Hear us out, beautiful people, because we have to keep it real. While we love the activities that we did on our visit, from the museum and trolley to even our brief time within Kurt Gowdy State Park, the activities are still somewhat limited.
I know I said that I may be more of a museum type of girl than I thought, but still not enough for them to be my main type of fun. Cheyenne's amazing access to the outdoors is a major reason why it still warrants a point. But those limited options also impact demographic applicability.
Still, to us, we may say that the history may be more attractive to older visitors, and families with young children will love the Depot Museum. And the outdoors is for everyone. Then we can still give at least 1 point for demographic applicability. But the area where we can give all the points to Cheyenne is affordability.
Yes, the prices we experienced in Wyoming were the cheapest we experienced on our whole road trip. That's because Wyoming has the lowest cost of living than all the Rocky Mountain states. Another area that Cheyenne knocks it out of the park is quality restaurants.
Yes, the small city is unassuming in that it could provide some great tasting food. But it's true. From the quality breakfast at the local Epic Egg to the award-winning options at Real Spur, which is actually a bar, nightclub, and venue space that features storage containers and repurposed railroad materials.
Their cocktails were just as good as the food. Bars and great food is a common combination in Cheyenne because we experienced both at yet another Cheyenne establishment, Westby Edge Brewing. The family-owned and operated company offers delicious food and, I can't believe I'm about to say this, really good beer. Who am I?
Yes, all of these restaurants are worth a try if you do find yourself in Cheyenne. Finally, in regards to special events, Cheyenne does not have any professional sports teams, but every year it does host one of the biggest events in the state, Frontier Days.
The event that's been held annually since 1897 occurs the last full week in July, and the festival features concerts, demonstrations, and of course, one of the largest outdoor rodeos in the country. From what we hear, it's a really great time, but we need to come back and experience it for ourselves, so only half of the points here.
Message! Adding up all of that, Cheyenne, Wyoming comes in at a respectable 7 out of 10 for level of fun. Okay, Cheyenne, the little city that could, came in higher than we probably expected, especially considering how much of our visit was impacted by the wind.
The level of fun was definitely a pleasant surprise, but the big question left for us to answer was, for this being the first city on our TWB Across America road trip, Volume 1, where we didn't find anywhere to dive extensively into the Black history, how would it stack up to our comfort scale?
Comfortability for Black people. So here we go. For perhaps one of the most important categories, this is how we are measuring our comfortability for Black people rating.
For one, we will be considering the amount of Black people we saw during our visit. Also, we will be considering the most recent Black population numbers.
Other points of consideration are how prevalent is the Black history of the area, also the visibility of signs that indicate inclusion.
Finally, we will be basing it on how comfortable or uncomfortable we feel personally walking around the city and into different establishments. Let's start with the amount of other Black people we saw during our visit. This was actually a bit of a surprise for us because we actually saw a lot more other Black people than we thought we would.
But what really made our visit in this regard was getting to meet up with local Cheyenne Black business owner, Jazminn Jackson, who sat down with us to talk about her event rental space, the Louise, and the Black experience here in Cheyenne.
My space is called the Louise Event Venue, named it after my mom. Yes, I wouldn't be here without my mom, so I named it after my mama. I feel like over time, it definitely changed. Back when I was in high school, junior high, it wasn't really cultural. Being the only Black person in my elementary class or junior high, that was very tough. But as an adult, I think that it has grown tremendously. I did a Black Excellence event last year. I had gathered up all of the Black-owned businesses here in Wyoming, and there was over 30. Just making that list was like crazy because I didn't know it was like that many of us. So just to know that and just to have a visual of that was amazing.
As for what she would say to potential Black travelers considering a visit to Cheyenne,
we are out here. There's not many of us, but there is many of us.
Thanks a lot, Jazminn. While we are giving 2 points for the amount of Black people seen, we cannot give any in regards to current population numbers. being that the recent population of Black or African American non-Hispanics in Cheyenne is less than 3%. But in regard to prevalence of Black history, we came down the middle and are giving 1 point.
Here's the deal about Cheyenne in relation to this aspect. No, we didn't notice an abundance of monuments or plaques explicitly dedicated to Black history around the city, and we definitely didn't find any historically Black districts like we did in Kansas City or Denver. But that did not mean that we did not see any Black history.
The fact is that Black residents have played a pivotal role in not only Cheyenne's, but all of Wyoming's history, influencing the city's political, social, and cultural story. Some even attribute the origins of Frontier Days to a Black cowboy named Sam Bronco Sam Stewart.
We think it's time that Cheyenne builds Sam Bronco Smith Stewart a statue. Considering these stories and experiencing examples like seeing artifacts that spoke to Black people's contributions to the railroad displayed within the Depot Museum, all of this made us consider that perhaps because of Cheyenne's low population overall, it stands as a perfect example of how Black history is American history. Message!
Visibility of inclusion was another area that Cheyenne made us have to reconsider our approach. We didn't see a lot of what we are used to interpreting as signs of inclusion. But again, that doesn't mean it isn't promoted in some way. The Black history being told a part of the overall history, and of course the mural dedicated to being the first state to grant women the right to vote, can all be seen as some examples of inclusion.
Yep, that's why we give a point to Cheyenne for signs of inclusion. Still, with all that said, let's get to our personal comfort level during our visit. We can say honestly that we felt pretty comfortable personally while we were there in Cheyenne.
Yes, the people we encountered around the town and in the establishments were pretty friendly and welcoming, from our trolley tour guide to employees at Railspur and Westby Edge. And we have to give a personal shout out to an employee at Epic Egg who DM'd us that we left our credit card at the restaurant. He even waited after his shift for us to come back to get it. This is why we are giving the full points for our personal comfort level in Cheyenne. And this brings Cheyenne to a respectable 6 out of 10 for comfortability for Black people rating.
Well, old Cheyenne, Wyoming ended up putting up a respectable case against our scale, coming in with a 5 for the drive, 7 for the fun, and a 6 for the comfort level. Based on these scores, we can say that if you do find yourself going through the Rocky Mountain states, Cheyenne definitely warrants a visit.
Yes, once the windstorm eased up and we were able to get out and experience some of the great things Cheyenne has to offer, we had a blast. Still, we can't give our full recommendation until we come back for Frontier Days.
Message! Now for us, it was on to the next stop, Billings, Montana. Yet another city we had never been to before, and yet another city with a low Black population. But would it be possible that on this stop we would find that our luck in being pleasantly surprised by these types of places might have finally run out?
Also, special thanks to everyone who participated in the making of this episode. And of course, be sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on all of our social media platforms to see our previous adventures.
Until next time, beautiful people, stay up, stay true, and do you.